Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and our guest today is Mr. Harrison Burckart. Mr.
Hello.
Burckart, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you very much for carving out some time on your, pleasant Sunday.
Of course.
In what was it in Pennsylvania?
Yes, more specifically, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
All right, so you're tuning in all the way from Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Just before we get started, I I have nothing but love and respect for America. I'm not one of those Canadians that's lost their mind.
Oh yeah, they're going to try to pin us against each other. I don't know what that's all about, but we just have to get over all that. Focus on
Yeah,
the big,
yeah.
focus on what we need to focus on instead.
So we'll get to that, but I thought maybe to start, if you could tell the audience a little about yourself.
Oh, gladly. Well, starting from the very beginning, I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but my family moved from there when I was 2, so I really don't remember that much of it. And I grew up in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Pittsburgh. So I really didn't get to go that far away. But I moved to start college at Duquesne when I was 18, and I'm now 20. So that's where I still am today.
And what did you study in college?
Oh, I'm studying finance and data analytics. But I'm still in there. I don't graduate until this December.
And what is the what program are you in? What bachelor's? What would it be?
Well, I'm both a finance major and an information systems major, but my information systems major is on a data analytics track. So I always call it data analytics because for me, it's just easier to understand it that way, but you can call it whatever you want.
Oh no, it's just I guess up here we clump things in together, like you're in computer science or engineering or arts.
I don't know where data analytics would fall. I mean, I guess wherever information systems falls, since it's lumped in there here.
Are you familiar with the expression STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics?
I am, yes.
Are you is your field in STEM or is it something adjacent?
We actually don't know that ourselves. In finance, there's definitely a lot of math involved in it, so I consider it in there. But there are definitely more science-based majors that do not consider us STEM. So it really depends on who you're talking to.
It sounds like you're in STEM if there's math involved.
I'm glad to hear that.
No. So I came across you in one of the spaces, and then
Yeah.
I just been keeping an eye on you, and you've been in like spaces. I'm guessing you don't sleep.
Well, you'd be pretty spot on. I mean, I figure I'm a college student anyway, so I'm always up doing something. But when I'm not doing homework, spaces are actually kind of nice. So, and I get to talk to like-minded people like yourself, and we get to do stuff like this.
Are you an outcast in college? The brainiac guy with political
Uh,
opinions?
I wouldn't call myself an outcast. I mean, I'm the only place I'm outspoken about this stuff is on X. It's like I have a double life. I have college student, and then I'm on X at night doing stuff like this. But
Well,
now my lives are starting to come together.
if the CIA is listening, they might want to reach out to you and poach you. You're good
Well,
at living two lives.
that's a good point. But yeah, it's not very common you see a 20-year-old in the spaces I like to go into. So I tend to get a lot of attention just for that. But
Yeah,
I'm
I can
okay with it.
imagine. Um, Here's a question for you. Are you a good student or were you a useless student like I was?
Well, I was a great student in high school. I had above a 4.0 and I was taking college classes. That's actually why I'm graduating in 2.5 years. I transferred in a bunch of credits. In college, I'd say I was still a decent student, but I didn't have a 4.0, that's for sure. But I'm okay with it. I mean, as long as you know the things you need to know, you're going to be okay.
So I guess we can jump into it. You had a suggestion which really tweaked my curiosity. It was in a space and someone cut you off, and it was something to do
Oh,
with a way to reshape and refund government without needing taxes. Can you go over that?
yes. Now, full disclosure, this idea is still in its infancy, but someone would say the same thing about me. So I guess that's not too surprising. But it's based on retirement funds. And I first thought of it about a year ago because I had an internship at a company called Mass Mutual Pittsburgh. It was insurance based, but it was also putting you on track to become a financial advisor. And we learned about retirement funds where an individual will save up all their life to have a big sum of money, and then they'll have a safe withdrawal rate of 4% every year once they have, say, $1 million, and then you just live on 40,000 a year indefinitely. And this goes into perpetuity because the fund keeps making money. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's just the basic rundown. And I was thinking to myself, what if we scaled this thing way up, and instead of having taxes, we just funded the government into perpetuity? Not only that, but we fund it in a way that actually aligns it with the interests of the people. Because if that was a big wealth fund and it was actually invested in the market and the money couldn't come out of the market, then the government is in the same place as the people and has to look out for the public interests by looking out for the private market. And I can go into specific details all throughout the podcast, but that's just a basic rundown of the idea.
Okay, let's walk through it. The money, where is it originally coming from? I guess it's people's paychecks, salaries, what?
Well, as in what makes the retirement fund, you mean?
Well, let's say like you and I, we start our own country. There's two of us.
Okay.
And we're going to have to start paying into this fund, right? And what is it? Our savings? Is it, where would the money come from?
Where'd the money come from? Well, a lot of it would come from the cuts that are already being made. For example, in America, we have Doge, and they're freeing up a bunch of money, and we could use that money in some of the funds. And we would definitely have to transition from a large government to a smaller government in order to do this. And a lot of the money from that could be used because a small government obviously costs less than a large government to run. But as far as where the money initially comes from, I mean, I do say that it's a way to eliminate taxes, and in the long run, that is true. But maybe just we might have to keep some things in place until the wealth funds are good to go. However, saying that, it could be a slippery slope because then you have politicians being like, oh, we need to increase how much we need in the fund for this amount of years for this such and such reason. We also can't have that. It needs to be like a specific number in a specific way. And it can't be through just exploiting people, maybe like a 5% sales tax until it's funded or something like that. Hopefully I make some sense. I can elaborate on anything.
No, it's fine. We're going to walk through this so the audience understands. How about this? Every year the government is going to reduce its budget by 1%, and it's going to take that reduction and it's going to put it in, is it an investment fund or is it a bank account?
It would be more like an investment fund. Okay. And then something I should elaborate on, what they're actually investing in could vary by each account. And it would probably even vary within one fund. So that aspect of it is subject to change all throughout its existence. But yes, I do like that idea of slowly reducing the budget and putting the money into the fund. That could definitely be a way to implement it.
We have something in Canada called the Canada Pension Plan, and you guys probably have similar. And it's sort of the same thing. So it's this massive pool of money, and then they're investing it, and then the returns on it would go back into the investment. So you're scaling that for the entire government kind of thing?
Yes, it's sort of. I mean, it wouldn't really be a pension I based it on retirement funds, but it's really not that kind of thing. It has more to do with just having the money, and then some of it gets withdrawn a year, maybe like 3% of the fund. But if it's growing 10% a year, like the S&P 500 tends to do, then that's a non-issue. So there's an example I often use. Say it takes $10 million a year to maintain a set of roads. Instead of coming up with that 10 million every year, you could find out what 10 million is 3% of. And I've done this calculation before. It's 334 million. You could take that 334 million, put it into a road fund, and then the 3% withdrawal rate is your 10 million every year. And not only that, but the fund keeps growing. So as you need bigger and better roads, it's a non-issue because 3% would eventually become something more like 25 million. And then you have some very nice roads. And then we have government systems that are not only not dependent on the people and taxation of them, but can slowly get better over time as an individual would get wealthier by just leaving their money alone in the market. Hopefully, it makes some sense. I can elaborate on anything.
No, it does. I was thinking about something else about whether you could privatize this. Um,
Hmm. There are ways there are aspects of it you could privatize. I mean, it's obviously money that would be owned by the public, but you could privatize the management of the money. But
yeah, like somebody could come and do a bid for a tender where they'll say, we'll manage all of your roads,
hmm,
and then they go to the bank and they get a loan, and based on the interest of the loan, some of it goes to the management of the roads, some of it goes back to the bank. But I'm wondering if that would work.
I mean, I guess it could. I mean, initially it could be a way just to come up with the money, because if you get a good enough interest rate, then you'll be net positive with your returns. So that could be a good way to fund everything initially. Would it work long term though? I'm not sure. So that's but it is a decent idea though.
Has this been done anywhere before?
I've looked it up a few times and I really haven't gotten anything other than like it's all been sites. It's either been your retirement fund and you or how your government is currently functioning. So I haven't been able to find it.
This sounds
Maybe
like a sovereign wealth fund, sort of. Like I would imagine Saudi Arabia does something like this.
I actually did see that. The sovereign wealth fund, it is a lot like that, but the wealth fund isn't for specific things. It's just a pool of money. What I'm thinking, for example, with the roads, it could be there, you could have a road fund, you could have an education fund, you could have a this fund, a that fund, and anything that's deemed necessary. And necessary is the key word because the government could say, "Oh, we need to have a whatever thing fund." No, it has to be basic stuff. So,
There's another way to look at this. You have customers, the taxpayers, that they put their money into this program, which is kind of like a bank. That program turns around and it gives loans to other companies that generate profit. They give interest back to the bank, and the bank shares some of that interest with the taxpayers indirectly with restrictions. We're not going to give you money. We're going to spend it on your roads.
okay. Yeah, so the money would be given to companies. The companies that are the companies would then be profitable and pay it back with interest. Then the interest used on the roads. Is
Well, that's
that
what
what
you
you?
just described, though, right? Like you said, we're going to invest the company in like a stock market. That's like it goes to somebody who generates a profit, who comes back to the wealth fund.
Uh, Something like that. You would just be buying stock in the company like everybody else. However, you could have things like that. I mean, diversifying the way you invest the money. But I was thinking more just investing in stocks the way regular people would, and then you just have the money there. So and you could easily put it in real estate. You could put it in safer stocks. You could put some in riskier stocks, just the way you would diversify your average portfolio, but on a massive scale.
You're basically trying to make the government profit centric more so
Yes,
than tax based.
definitely. Because then it becomes a profitable entity and can do the things it needs to do. That way, there's a big pool of money funding a small government, but the big pool of money is invested into the private sector, and it's actually boosting the private sector rather than limiting it the way government typically does.
It strikes me like a bank. Like this is sort of what a bank does. But I see where you're going with it because a bank gives out loans to individual companies, whereas it's more like a fund where you're just investing in the stock
I
market.
mean, the fund could definitely give loans of many kinds, but that in of itself is a slippery slope. You obviously have to be careful who you're loaning money to, but that could definitely be an option.
I I think Canada does this. I'm sure America does. Like I use the example of the pensions. So you pay into a pool, and then they have fund managers that effectively efficiently allocate to investments, and it's caused the government to get into a lot of trouble because they're investing in China, and people are like, why the hell are
Mm,
you investing in a hostile nation?
exactly. Now the pension plans and well, we have something called 401ks here. Both of these have a lot of problems in the sense that you're just putting money in and then you're getting a certain amount of money out, but it's really scamming those people because it's showing them, oh, you're going to be nice and secure. However, if you just put that money into the market regularly, you could be a multimillionaire by the time you would retire, assuming you put in what you should put in. So why would you even need a pension plan or anything like that? Especially because it would be super limited because the government obviously doesn't want to give you your money. So you can't withdraw this, you can't do that, and it would just be bad. And expanding on that, if we were to if we were to put that big sum of money in, it would grow exponentially. And then there would be more money than we could ever dream of for just about anything. Hopefully I'm making sense. I can go back to anything.
No, no, no. If I look like I'm confused, it's because I'm simple-minded. This is
No,
nothing.
no,
It's
no.
not a reflection on you.
That's
Um,
okay.
no, I'm just so like one of the challenges that you'd have to overcome is probably get rid of a big chunk of the bureaucracy, which is good. But these,
100%.
these buggers, they can vote. That's the problem we're having in Canada. They've introduced all of these bills that blow up the size of government, and then you
Yeah.
try to repeal it, and then you get these bureaucrats. They start flooding into the streets.
Yes.
You guys call it a rent a riot. Like their
Yeah.
jobs are secured. They just go out there protest.
There would have to be big budget cuts in order to make this work. And that's oftentimes a rebuttal used against this. But to me, it's one of the things for it. Get the bureaucracy out, don't fund dumb things, and this can work. But yeah,
And then how do
sorry,
you how do you prevent the like how do you prevent the Nancy Pelosi's from getting in there and just robbing the fund?
that's a very valid point. An idea that I had, you could have the way we have a constitution here, you could have constitutions for the fund, as in certain things are not allowed to happen. Like, for example, you could say, no, not one penny of the principal can ever be withdrawn, only what the fund makes, and only a maximum of its safe withdrawal rate, which I'm using 3% as opposed to the typical 4%. That way there's room for it to grow. So even if it's a $1 billion fund, you could only withdraw $30 million a year for whatever you need, and you cannot rob the billion. And any loans would have to be privately approved by whoever's managing it if we were to go the loan route. Otherwise, you just have the government loaning money to itself and robbing the fund that way. Because then it's like, oh, we got to forgive our own loans. But no, we can't do that. And then the fund, I would say it should be mostly passively managed, because then it's just in the stock market and it's not allocated towards any particular thing. It's just kind of in there. But there could definitely be some actively managed parts that go to things in venture capital or like technology development of some kind. And obviously that shouldn't be exploited. I mean, there are a bunch of scams revolving around like green energy and that sort of thing. Obviously those would have to be weeded out. But you could definitely invest in things that would make the world better if they succeeded, knowing that you could take certain risks. And but yeah, the Constitution, it's obviously still being drafted. And keep in mind, everything that I've been proposing, it's very much in its infancy, and it's incubated just about every day, because I thought of this about a year ago, obviously. So anything you have to add, I'm all for it. But yeah, the idea of a constitution to the fund is essential in my opinion.
They've done a different version of this for a very long time. You're talking about investing in whatever the stock market, but they've done it the other way where you're talking about leveraging assets to invest in the stock market. They've been leveraging assets to get loans. So I mentioned the Canada Pension Plan. You got the mortgages, and in the Fed, they own all the mortgages. The Nixon administration, he nationalized a whole bunch of your parks to basically use as collateral So they've done it the other way to get to, in a nefarious way to pay interest, but
Hmm.
you're doing a benevolent way to actually earn interest and invest it
Right.
back in the country.
Exactly. But yeah, that's a major problem with this, because a common rebuttal is that it can be exploited, and that is definitely true and needs to be addressed before it's implemented. So anything we can do as far as that's concerned, whether it be that constitution or new laws drafted specifically for the funds and things that all the fund managers have to follow, that could easily be implemented, and it wouldn't be tyrannical because you're managing the people's money. So the people can dictate certain things be done with the money. Of course, I mean that's just how it always is.
Are you
Oh,
have you
go
heard
ahead.
about the sovereign wealth fund that Donald
Yes,
Trump is trying to set up?
I have heard of that,
I wonder
and
if he's thinking of doing the same thing.
I I've thought that myself. However, I do like the sovereign wealth fund, as you've probably guessed, but it's not for something specific. It's just a pool of money, and I think that that kind of fund and these kind of funds can exist simultaneously, because obviously new things would come up and we would need to take from the general pool to fund certain things. But then you have these other things that can't be touched ever, that have nothing to do with anything else that comes up. I mean, you're always, unless you invent flying cars tomorrow, which will probably not happen, you're always going to need roads. Unless buildings become fireproof, you're always going to need firefighters and that sort of thing. So have separate funds for those, never touch it. Have a general fund for whatever comes up. That's my honest opinion. Hopefully I make some sense in saying that.
No, it does. Let me ask you another question. Who would fund this fund? Are you thinking only the citizens and corporations? Would the government have to go and find people to invest?
Well, there would be a number of different things. The problem with finding people to invest is they would want to own a percentage, and that would defeat the whole purpose. Something I'm thinking, for example, we have Doge in America, and if they're successful, they can probably cut things way back. For example, Elon Musk wants to cut $1 trillion of spending. Some of that could just be cut, and then say we took another percentage and we put it into funds like this, and then the money was just there. That could be a way to fund it initially. And then
Right.
obviously I want to get rid of taxes, but maybe we can slowly scale taxes down and use the money we get in the fund and then never tax anybody again. So that everybody would be behind it, because you're paying less taxes and eventually you'll be paying zero. Those are just two ways. There could be several that I can't even think of. I mean, obviously people could weigh in and try to improve things, but
So I'm
those
going
are
to
just,
ask you some detailed questions. The
go ahead.
reduction. So if you cut $1 trillion, I'm going to simplify it, but that's $1 trillion of taxpayer money that's being saved.
Yes.
Um, do you have you thought about whether only it'll be income tax, corporate tax, or you just lump them all together?
Well, I mean, the different kinds are different, but I mean, my plan involves eventually eliminating all of them. But I've always seen income tax and property tax as just negative, because they incentivize people to not build things and to not stimulate the economy naturally. I mean, I'm not in favor of any taxes, but I've always been more in favor of sales taxes, because it's like, okay, you're paying a fee for utilizing the economy. Say you want to buy a car, you can pay a 5% sales tax. You use the economy to get the car. It's more justifiable, in my opinion. So you could say, okay, we're going to leave this tax around for 10 years, but all the money's going into the wealth funds. And that could be a way to fund it. And then you
That's a
could
good
have a day where
answer.
taxes are done. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a good answer. The only
Thank you.
thing I'll add is the problem I have with a sales tax or a value added tax. You need a massive accounting system in place. Essentially, every company in the country acts as a broker for your revenue service. That's my only concern. But
I,
otherwise, I agree with you. Yeah.
yeah, you're definitely right. It would have to be a big system. But if that system is set up to die in 10 years, then you obviously wouldn't need as big of a system. You could plan things around that. But you're 100% right. It would need a big system, and it could turn into a bureaucracy if we're not careful. And also keep in mind, even though I didn't say it was justifiable. I only said it was more justifiable than the other two. So it would also.
No, I'm not criticizing you. It's a
No,
system we
no.
have right now. Like in Canada, I'm sure it's the same in the US. Like you collect those sales taxes and then you remit them to your state or federal government.
Yes. That's what's similar over here too, where states you pay state taxes and federal taxes, and I believe states pay something to the government. Well, some states pay in, some states receive. So that's the whole thing there. I'm honestly not too familiar with that. I should probably look into it a little more. But yeah, that's the current system. I mean, as you probably guessed, I focus less on the current system and more building a new system. But yeah, that's pretty much what we have here.
Yeah, I'm pretty clueless when it comes to tax law as well, so I'm
Okay.
guilty. Uh, what about, have you like crunched any of the numbers? I would imagine you
I've
need
crunched.
more money. Like how many years until you break even and you don't, it's just self-fulfilling.
That's actually a very good question. It would depend on what the government collects in taxes, which obviously should be a little bit lower compared to what it spends. So we would have to be in a surplus, meaning it, and that could be done. We need a lot of cuts, so I don't think taxes need to increase. A lot of people are going to be saying, "Oh, you need to increase taxes." No, you just need to cut off all the dumb stuff, and there you go. But yeah, you're right. Funding would be a bit of a hassle at first, but after we rearrange just a few things, the money would be there.
Um,
Whether in America or Canada, it could really apply anywhere.
I can bring up Chat GPT if you want. We can ask.
Gladly. I did crunch a few numbers, Pittsburgh centric. By all means, do have Chat GPT up. I'd love to crunch more. But I looked up how much it costs to run, how much Pittsburgh spends on education per year, primary through high school, however you want to describe it. That's what it is. It's like $840 million a year. So what's 3% of that? ChatGPT told me something like 30 billion.
Why is 3% a magic number?
Well, if you withdraw too much money, you won't. The fund would be in jeopardy of not only not gaining, not only not being profitable, but slowly being taken away anyway. The common number is 4% with retirement funds, but the reason I'm using 3 is so that it has a little bit more of a window to actually grow, because you figure inflation's going to hit it, whatever else is going to hit it. We're eventually going to need bigger roads and more stuff. But what you're doing with Chat GPT is probably better because we can work with actual numbers.
I'm flying blind here because I didn't I didn't research this stuff before the episode.
That's okay.
So you got a federal budget of 7 trillion, which is
Yes,
astronomical.
that it is.
Describe blah blah for defense, whatever. The federal government is projected to collect around 5.5 trillion, so it's representing 18.7% of GDP.
Yes.
Man, there's so many answers here.
Yeah. That's
So,
always a problem with. The only real problem I've had with those kind of things is they give you 4 answers. Okay, which of these 4 is right?
yeah, like how could you not know what your debt is? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 35 trillion last time I checked, but it increases every day. So I don't. It's like I don't even know anymore, and I'm in finance. I should be keeping up with it, but
Why don't we
it's
just
just.
ask it a targeted question? If Doge manages to cut the budget by 1 trillion, could you into a fund and generate profits in lieu of taxation? Pretty loaded question. The answer is yes.
Now, a lot of these numbers really don't scare me because how much waste, fraud, and abuse is truly in there? For all we know, 90% of it could be terrible. So who knows what the actual numbers are? But
So is this saying that if you invested $1 trillion, it would yield about 70 billion per year?
yes,
Uh,
and then that money could be used to. It would obviously have to fund a much smaller government, but it could fund certain things within government, and it can. And the transition can be slow. Say 1 trillion is invested and it funds very specific things, and then in another couple of years it happens again, and then in another couple of years it happens again. This could be a very slow process.
so I'm going to ask a question. So don't don't
No, no, no.
panic. But I have to ask
Anything you've got.
ChatGPT this question. Uh, if we wanted to, if we basically, I want to know if we wanted to fund the government exclusively from a sovereign wealth fund, how much do we have to put in to begin with? To fund the government exclusively from a sovereign wealth.
Sorry, I don't know what just happened there, but
Did you hear me?
yes.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like, if you want to fund the 7 trillion government budget, how much would we need to initially like invest in the fund?
Well, it's likely going to divide that number by 0.03.
Required fund size, annual budget, annual return rate.
Yeah.
230.
Those numbers would definitely be a problem if they were the numbers. However, those numbers don't scare me because how much is the government spending versus how much does the government need to spend? All of this would have to come after some serious budget cuts.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. So even if you did budget cuts, I mean, I would start with this, right? So the required fund size, annual budget, right? That's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a big chunk of that budget, I have a feeling in the US as well, is these useless, unnecessary bureaucrats or money being misappropriated for things like military contractors. So
Right.
they have like $1,000 item, they sell it for $10 million.
Yes, that is a big problem. It's one of the reasons I had a problem with the $1 trillion military budget that's being proposed. Because instead of increasing the budget, let's increase what the budget does by reallocating things and finding situations like that, which really doesn't happen enough, and that's why the number's so inflated, as you were just saying.
One of the problems we have in Canada, and I alluded to this earlier, take like homelessness or mental health issues.
Mm.
A socialist government, they get to power, and they, on compassionate grounds, are like, we will increase, we will allocate $3 billion to help the homeless. They do that. Like 90% of that money goes to useless bureaucrats or, nonprofits that are stealing it. And then you get a conservative government in to try to repeal that law. But now those new bureaucrats are a voting bloc, and you can't vote these bastards out.
Mm-hmm. That is a big problem. And yeah, that it really is numbers like that. It's mostly waste and then one good thing. So it's very inflated and very bad, both in Canada and the United States. So we could personally, I think the government could spend a fifth of what it currently spends and be completely fine. So that's how bad it is.
You know what you could do if I was giving you marketing advice to sell this?
Sure.
Say for every like 2 bureaucrats that we fire or we let go, we're going to take one of them, the salary, and we'll put it in a wealth fund to secure a better future for your children.
I like that. I like that a lot. Something else that could be done, the sovereign wealth fund Trump talked about, maybe initially everything goes in that, and then it is used to create the specific wealth funds. Because I was saying both can exist at the same time. So yeah, that could be done today. The salary goes in the wealth fund.
I would imagine Trump's suggestion, the one that you just brought up, is probably stronger than mine because he's literally saying we're going to tap into our energy resources. So if Exxon and Shell are drilling, 50% of that goes into the wealth fund and we'll fund the government, no income tax.
Sure. That does make sense. And if they're using government land to do that, you could justify saying we want some. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And if we truly have the amount of energy that Trump says we have, which I believe we do, that could fund a significant portion of the wealth fund. And initially, that one of two things could happen. It could be a hybrid where things are partially funded by the wealth fund at first, and then we slowly ease into it. Or we could just have the wealth fund growing and not fund anything with it until it's at a certain level. There are two ways in which we can go. But yeah, I like that idea. Sorry, I don't mean to ramble on, but there's
No,
a
no,
lot to this.
no, it's a good suggestion. Sorry. Let me give you some potential pitfalls.
Okay.
Nothing is going to stop a reckless government from plundering the wealth fund. It happened in Canada. We used to have massive gold reserves, and they ran out of money, so they just sold off the gold, and everyone suspects they used the money to pay the bureaucrats' salaries. So
Yeah, you are right. No, nothing can stop the reckless government. So we would have to prevent the reckless government from ever being able to touch it. It's like not say, okay, you can't manage it. We would have to say, you can't even touch this. It has nothing to do with you.
yeah, and it's easier said than done. But if you look at Texas, you guys have a gold depository, so it's a little bit different. They're not allowed to use your gold, but in that case, you're the owner of the gold that you deposit.
Sure.
You'd have to come up with something like that where the managers are not the owners of that fund.
Yeah. Now, how much gold is actually in Fort Knox? That's a much better question, but yeah, I get what you mean.
I can answer that simply. It's probably zero. It's all gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
Uh,
My question, if all the gold was sold, who was it sold to and where is it? Like,
I can speculate.
sure.
Some of it might have gone to China for their BRICS program. Some
Yeah,
of
I can
it
see.
probably like these the Bank for International Settlements, or all of these international bankers that like they predict when there's going to be a currency inflation and they just buy the gold before that happens. That's what happened to you guys in 71.
Yeah, that is definitely not good. And the gold, I think there's a lot more to it. Maybe the gold was sold in order to transfer the gold into something else. And that's why we've seen various global shifts. I mean, obviously, that's just me speculating, but it seems plausible. I mean, if you were trying to shift the power dynamics of the world, you'd probably move the gold around.
Well, what do you mean? Can you elaborate?
Well, we used to, in the United States, we used to be on something called the gold standard. And what currency was thought of as actual value through gold. And then in 1913, we just went off that and the currency was backed by nothing. And it essentially became worthless. It's just an illusion that we all, I don't know if live by is the right term, but we all just accept this. But gold used to back all the currencies, which means gold is the only thing that actually has real monetary value. So by getting everybody off the gold standard and then slowly moving gold around, you can move actual wealth to places like China or places like the Vatican or anywhere else that the globalists and the elites would want the gold and the power. And then by the time everybody realizes what happened, it's too late.
Yeah, I think you in a more articulate way you said exactly what I said.
Yeah. That's all right. But yeah, it there needs to be light on this, otherwise it will not end well. Because if we break the illusion now, is it too late? I don't know, but we have a chance, in my opinion. So that's why things like this and talking about things like the gold reserves matter, because maybe we can still do something. And in 30 years, when I'm 50, can we do anything? That's why I'm doing this as a young man, because I figure, wait, because by the time I become an older man, the opportunity is going to be gone.
The amount
I
of
can
wealth
imagine. Sorry, go ahead.
like the amount of wealth that they're stealing from people, even through something like the interest rate,
Yes.
it's really sinister. You mentioned 1913. Like, you guys just handed over your entire monetary system to private banking interests.
We did. I believe it was J.P. Morgan. I could be wrong about the specific banker, but he said, like, gold is money, or gold is value. Everything else is just a loan. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what's going on.
I think he said, gold is money, everything else is credit.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
But it's bad. Now, maybe the gold could have been stolen for all we know. And if that was the case, we could obviously demand it be returned. And with the military of the United States, we can probably get it back. But if it was bought, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So that's a whole other issue in of itself.
Do you follow Catherine Austin Fitts? Do you know her?
Do I follow who?
Her name this is Catherine Austin Fitts. She used to work for the Department of Housing, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and she's looked into the Bank for International Settlements. You mentioned the Vatican, obviously China. These are sovereign entities.
Right.
So that means they're not subject to anybody's laws of any country, and they can't be audited.
Yeah.
If the gold is in the Bank for International Settlements, you're never going to find a paper trail.
That's not good. I don't know what can be done about that. Is there anything that can be done? Hopefully. I mean, there could be somebody in the chat who knows more, or the chat, or the just viewing, who knows more about that whole aspect of finance than me, but it looks pretty grim right now. Could there be things behind the scenes I don't know about? Maybe, but who knows?
I look at it as a war. And so Donald Trump getting in, he basically, he's getting revenge for the globalists that kicked him out in 2020.
Yeah.
And he sparked this war, and now Canada Canada is a battleground.
Yes.
They parachuted this globalist Mark Carney in. He couldn't fix the problem that Justin Trudeau caused. And yesterday, or a few days ago, they brought the king in, and the king is giving a speech. Like, the king is not supposed to get involved in politics. So I think even they realize that, they need to get their hands dirty now.
Yeah, that definitely says something. Something the globalists are very into is symbolism. Because I've looked into this. Their whole religion involves putting the things they want to do out there into the world. And through doing that, they kind of, it's like they're allowing, like the people are consenting to the evil and allowing it into the world, even though they don't actually know what they're doing. So things like the king speaking and the verbiage in various bills. And in one of the spaces, the Canadian Constitution came up, certain verbiage in that. It's not random stuff. They're trying to communicate what they're trying to do. And as long as you learn how to read between the lines, you can see it.
You mean like something as not so subtle as "you will own nothing and be happy," or more subtle?
Something like, as far as how subtle it is, I'm really not sure. But things like, that's basically what they're trying to say. But it can be done through pictures. It can be done through basically saying you will own nothing and be happy, but in a more complicated way, so that people will not talk about it. And if they say they don't understand it, they probably won't, because they want to sound smart, which allows the illusion to continue. But a lot of times they basically say, we're going to take over the world. This and this and this is going to happen. And it's just there for everybody to see.
I always say they test the waters so that they'll come out and they'll say something like a path to citizenship for all uh,
Hmm.
immigrants and illegals. You know, like they sneak that in the end there, and they want to see how much outrage there is amongst the public. And
Yeah.
if it's palatable, they'll bring in the illegals as well.
Yeah. And then they'll go to legal immigrants and say, oh, you should be all for this because you are from somewhere else. Like, no, you legal ones came here to build something. The illegal ones came here to invade. They're not even immigrants, in my opinion. They're just invaders. But
Yeah, you
it's,
guys. Well, you guys have a backbone in the U.S. and you call it what it is. You call it an invasion. Over
hmm,
here, we're just clueless. The entire demographics changing, and no one does anything or says anything.
yeah, I think a lot of that's cultural because we come from a group that where a bunch of farmers rose up and fought the British and won, and that formed our culture. And no offense to you guys, but like you didn't fight the British and got independence through a more peaceful route, and that founded your culture. So it's like Americans are more willing to just say this isn't okay. We're going to fight it. And nothing against Canadians, but I think in order to solve this kind of problem, Canadians would have to have the same attitude and just say, this is an invasion. This is bad. We got to do something now.
You know, I never understood why, because when you guys had your revolution in 1776 ish,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know. You asked Canada to join, but Canadians are like, nah, this is fine. We like the king. We like
Mm-hmm.
being subjects. And I never understood what made you guys different from old school Canadians.
I'm I'm really not sure either. If I was alive back then, I would be able to tell you that obviously wasn't. But I something else I think it is a lot of loyalists fled to Canada, and then
Yeah,
it was
thanks a lot for that, by the way.
oh yeah, that I know it sucks, man. But yeah, and by the time we asked Canada to join, a lot of the loyalists had arrived there. So that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I guess in some ways it's your fault that we're a socialist nightmare now.
I suppose it would be, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where else to go with this. So the sovereign wealth fund thing. I mean, it seems like a good idea, or sorry, whatever the fund based government.
Yeah, it's like imagine a bunch of sovereign wealth funds, but instead of like being general, it's like the education fund, the maintenance fund for roads, the this fund, the that fund, and I think it would coexist alongside a sovereign wealth fund. So, a sovereign wealth fund's still a good idea. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify
No,
that.
um, I would. I mean, it would be useful if you had some like figures, numbers. It might be scary because it could take a while to build up this fund, like a decade.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, I've got a few. I talked a little bit about Pittsburgh and how much they spend on education. I calculated that all out. And what it was about $840 million a year that all schools we call the we call public school elementary through high school. All of them combined spend $840 million a year. Now take that with a grain of salt because how much of it's actually necessary. But let's use this number anyway. If you want to find what it is 3% of, there are a couple ways to do that. Let's divide by 3 and then multiply that by 100. So 28 billion, but if we round it up to 30 billion, you could take $30 billion and fund all education in Pittsburgh indefinitely. So each little each city and each town could break things up in that way and then just have financial goals for their funds. And it could be more of an individual basis. This fund gets funded, that fund gets funded. That way it can happen at a scale that's actually doable.
There's another way that you could do this, and I don't know if I
Well, I'm
even
all
feel
ears.
comfortable.
It's okay.
North Dakota, they have a sovereign state bank,
Hmm.
and I believe a sovereign bank can print money.
Hmm.
So you could just print the money and create the funds on day one. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's going to cause other problems if you printed 140 trillion dollars in one day.
that that is not the route we want to take. We would want to get the money organically. Otherwise, it would be hyperinflation, and the money would be worthless, which means we didn't achieve anything. We just broke the economy.
We're
I'm very
doing
glad
what
you
they're
brought that up
doing.
because I needed to say it. I don't know.
Yeah, the problem can't be the solution.
Yes, that happens a lot. People try to solve things with the problem, and then the problem just gets bigger, and everybody wonders why. It's like, of course, you just amplified everything.
You mentioned 1913.
Yes,
There's a couple of other inflection points in U.S. history.
yes, there are.
1970. It's all Woodrow Wilson. Man, that guy. He got rid of your senators that were appointed, and then he's the one that changed the 16th Amendment, changed your taxation policy. Are you familiar with that?
A
If
little
you're not,
bit.
it's fine. It's okay.
I'm a little bit
Um,
familiar, but enlighten
I
me.
think I hope I'm remembering it right. Before the 16th Amendment, your taxes were apportioned. So if you need to raise $1 trillion federally, uh, every state has to pay based on their population size, the percentage of that,
Hmm.
and that makes it illegal to have an income tax because an income tax violates that rule of equality of taxation.
Hmm.
So they amended the Constitution and then they brought the income tax.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah, that I do know it was illegal for a very long time. Well, not only illegal, but unconstitutional. I definitely think there need to be more amendments to the Constitution, thanks to some things that have happened. Repealing the 16th has to be one of them. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the 21st Amendment cancels out the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition.
Right.
And I think that needs to be done with the 16th Amendment as well. If
Oh yeah.
so, that it's amending the Constitution is very hard, but that's definitely a necessity.
What is your amendment formula? Do you know for the Constitution?
Well, there's the House and the Senate. In one, you need a majority, in the other, you need a supermajority.
Really?
I'm sure we can just look this up. Maybe you need a supermajority from all of them. Oh, okay, both. That makes sense because of what we're doing here. Good.
Oh, there's another way. You can do it through the state legislatures.
Hmm.
It's never been used.
Huh. Well, very interesting.
So you need to get 2/3, 66%.
Yes.
In I know you didn't ask, but in Canada, you need to get 7 out of the 10 provinces, which
Hmm.
is 2/3, I guess. And those 7 provinces has to equal more than 50% of the population.
Hmm.
Because we got two provinces that control everything in this country, Ontario and Quebec, and it's
Interesting.
almost impossible. It's impossible to do a constitutional amendment.
Thanks. So, sometimes I think there's more to that than just coincidence, but yeah, that sounds about right. That's one of the reasons we have the electoral college down here, because not only that, but we have the Senate and other things, because you can't just base it on population. You also have to segment the population into certain groups and base it off those groups. And the groups in this case are states, and that's why we did that.
Your electoral college, my understanding of it is very limited. Can you explain it to me?
Well, I don't know what good my understanding is, but yeah, I'll attempt to do that. So there are a total of 270 electoral votes. Each state gets a certain amount for their population, plus two more to represent that state government. So it's somewhat based on population, but each state also gets a say. So the lowest amount of votes a state can have is 3, and then it can go as high as it wants. Because if you have millions of people in your state, then you get more of the votes. And
That's exactly how I understood it. But I mean, maybe it was a good idea at the time when their populations were more like equal. But if you have a state like South Dakota, which doesn't have that many people, and then a state like California, that one extra seat doesn't really make that much of a difference. The electoral district, whatever.
I see what you mean, but I mean, I honestly I can't think of a better system. I mean, I've always liked the electoral college because big populated areas like cities, which are mostly left leaning, would control everything the way Ontario and Quebec do up in Canada without something like the electoral college. I'm not trying to single you guys out, but that's why I like the electoral college so much.
No, I like it. I'm just saying I don't know if it's enough to stop this,
Oh,
because the populations are growing so much and they're being centralized in these woke urban centers.
I see what you mean.
Like, let's take the Senate, the U.S. Senate. That's beautiful because every state gets one. Well, it's 2, but you get a say, and it's equal. Like, so if California has more population, they have more representatives, congresspersons. They can introduce more laws, but they don't have the power to approve those laws in the Senate, is what I mean.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Things have to go through both of them, so you have a bit of a filter on either side. And that was the original idea with 3 branches of government. They limit each other. That way one doesn't get more powerful than the others. But yeah, but the Senate and the House they're within one branch though. So I guess that really doesn't apply that much here. It's just more that branch and how it fights.
I like you guys. So you have 3 co-equal branches.
Yes.
I always look at it. You have the legislature and the executive on one side, and the Supreme Court on the other. The Supreme Court's supposed to be equal, and it's done really well in the U.S. compared to Canada. In Canada, I always say our Supreme Court's collapsed into the government. Like, there's no distinction between them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember someone was saying in one of the spaces it was worded in such a way to just give one group a lot of the power. And if the branches aren't equal, you don't have 3 branches. You have one big established thing and 2 things sticking out of it. So equality is essential for the branches. Otherwise, they're not actually branches.
Well, Harrison, we're approaching 1 hour.
Oh,
I don't know. I had a really good time.
it's like we are. I did too. I hope I said something worth saying. I'm sure the audience will determine that. But
No, you did, and we'll bring you back at some point, and
I'd love to come back.
let's work on this and see if there's any way we can put some numbers to this and see how it would start.
I did the Pittsburgh numbers. The only thing I can think to do, maybe I can do like maybe 100 more of those just so we have an actual sample we can work with. And this is very much in the incubation stage, so we can actually kind of build this on the stream because as I'm explaining, I understand certain aspects a little better just because it's so new.
Well, certainly, I look forward to it. Harrison, where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, I've got my X handle right down there, and that's where I post most of my stuff. I'm the most interactive on it. But I've also got an Instagram account, but I only post a few stories on there, so X is probably the best one.
All right. Any last words?
Nothing too much. I am going to double check my handle though, make sure it's right. Yeah, it's right. So you guys can go there. But any last words? I mean, we tend to think of things in a way that is limited to what we have already experienced and already tried. But if we can try to find solutions in a completely organic way and assess things as individuals rather than members of a party or members of this and that and the other thing, we can actually come up with organic solutions that can actually make a real difference in not only politics or business, but our world in general, and we can make it a much better place. That's what I'm trying to do with this, and that's what I would encourage everyone else to do, everyone listening to this.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Harrison, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope to come on again soon.
Absolutely. We'll get you back on. Take care.
You as well.